I just feel fancier when there's music at the beginning of doing something. So yeah. So, and there's Sherry, our final contestant here. So welcome everybody. And so just super quick introductions. Just, hey, Christian Buckley, RD MVP based out of Salt Lake City with CollabTalk. And we'll just kind of go. So Adam, next.
Adam Ball, Teams MVP and co-founder of CommsV Next and Cloud Revolution based in Denver.
Then Sharon.
Sharon, CEO of Smarter Consulting, RD, MVP, MCT, all the things.
And just escaped a very large storm. So, yes.
Yeah, too true. Yeah, okay there.
Sherry.
I had to resist the urge to say, you blow me away.
Too soon. Okay.
Sherry Oswald, MVP, MCT, Office Master, and Productivity Specialist from Colorado Springs.
And Ben?
All right, Ben Stedgink, MVP, Microsoft 365 and security. Just missed the very large storm up in the north side of Jacksonville. Owner, chief consultant of IntelliGink.
And Eric.
Yeah, hey everybody. Eric Overfield, CIO of CryoSpark. I'm based out of California, and similar to the others, MVP, RD, MCT, all the rest. So
excellent. Well,
happy to be here.
Glad to have everybody here. And I think I've got there we go with the branding there. Yeah, Jay. So yeah, for those that are we just wrapped up the the monthly CollabTalk TweetJam. So it brought it back. So it's been months. It's been since the beginning of the year since we did this, but it's back on a monthly schedule. We're adding audio. So we're doing, while the TweetJam is going on, we're also doing the audio for folks that want to listen in the discussion, because there's nothing better than trying to sit there and type and tweet while also holding a conversation. So that's great. And then what I had been doing for a couple of years was interviewing one person usually after the event. And instead, we're going to do it as a small panel. So the next about 30 minutes, we're going to go through and share our takeaways from the 7 questions from the latest topic. The topic was understanding or creating a baseline for Copilot adoption. And I asked that question in the blog post, like, are you ready for Copilot? So the first question was, what does AI readiness mean for organizations preparing to adopt Microsoft Copilot? And what are the first steps in ensuring a successful rollout? So have at it.
Having done a lot of migrations, they need to clean out their garbage. The companies are just not ready for it because people are digital hoarders. And my name is Sherry. I'm a digital hoarder. I have a couple of terabyte, like multi-terabyte hard drives. And until last summer, I finally took the time to clean out my Office 2000 courseware. Like, why do I have that 20 years later? I don't need it, but I did need it for something, apparently, because I never got rid of it. Just looking at that, I know in a lot of organizations are not cleaning out their stuff, and it's going to surface and it's going to show, garbage in, garbage out.
We're doing quite a bit of these assessments and rollouts for our clients. And I think every service Microsoft 365 Services company has some sort of Copilot readiness offering. We're all basically the same price. So that not a big surprise there. But what I'm finding is a lot of people have turned on Copilot. They're easy licenses to get. They get 5 of them. They turn them on. And now they don't know what to do. So definitely data is a huge one for me. So auditing your content, understanding what you have. There's an education piece, at least at the leadership level, or who's going to be rolling out. What is Copilot? What's it supposed to do? Because when I start using words like grounding or high values Copilot scenarios, people don't even know what that means. And that could be a problem within the organization. And that the second piece is the big one for me is, why do you want to roll out Copilot? How's it going to be valuable for your organization? Because most people don't get ChatGPT or generative AI yet. They don't even know what it can do. Therefore, creating scenarios for your team that can be really successful with it. Like, hey, this is a great way because we use Excel all the time. Use Copilot in Excel. Use these kind of prompts. This is how it's going to accelerate what we do in our org. Having a list of that, having an idea of how to actually drive adoption is going to be pretty important too.
I can't agree more with that. of just specific things that are really tailored to the organization. Otherwise, so many times we get to these demos and everything, and I always say these are, the low hanging fruit is a lot of times, parlor tricks of like, oh, that's really neat, that's kind of cool, but I'm not going to use that every day. And the other thing I always say is we're all intelligent human beings. I think we can write our own emails. You don't need it to rewrite to write the emails for me necessarily. I may need it to rewrite, because I know I'm very casual, so I might need a more professional tone. That's a fantastic tool at that point. But having those specific use cases really does help.
I think most importantly, and we were talking about this during the TweetJam, is you need to look at it as a major change. And so you need to create an initiative around it. You need to preemptively budget for it. You need to know what problems you're trying to solve. I think at a readiness level, there's a tech readiness level, and then there's a business or a change management readiness level as well. And I think a lot of people see and are talking about the tech readiness, but they're not talking about the change management readiness, the cost readiness, the, initiative readiness at a business layer. And so I'd say as long as you're matching all of those things up together, and so it's, people, process, training, all of it, I think you'll at least be at a lower risk and a higher chance of success.
Yeah, 100% agree with that, because people now, they'll go out and they'll search the internet, and all of that is true. Everything on the internet is true, right? They don't take their cognitive skills and look at them as thinking human beings and go, is that true? And I think Copilot is going to surface that too. We've gotten kind of lazy and dependent on search and assuming what's out there is valid.
There's a conversation online yesterday where I said, I believe everything on the internet. I found a clip from the movie Spinal Tap where David St. Hubbins made the quote, says, I believe everything that I read. And I think that makes me, a more intelligent person than somebody who never reads or anyway, it's incredibly stupid statement about the believing everything. I'll have to add the clip in again to this and share it out via social. But yeah, one of the readiness aspects of this is helping people understand how the technology works. It's not search. You're getting information, insights, ideas, like all the other things out of that. But it's also so critical to understand where am I asking this question? What data set? Is it a Copilot, like a SharePoint Copilot that's on a certain subset of data? Like, how have we trained that? How have we prepared that data to get the response, to get the output that we're looking for? And it's a different way of thinking of it. And it's, again, not search.
Yeah. And I think with that, Christian, you just brought it up as knowing what it can and can't do. And I've jumped on calls even with some clients that they're looking at Copilot and I show them the meeting summary. And they're like, well, can I ask Copilot to go in and substitute different words into my meeting summary and rewrite my whole meeting summary? Or can I ask it to go rewrite an entire document for me? And there are still certain limitations. Like Copilot is not I'm going to go in and do everything for you and you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to use find and replace in Word, because I can just go in and ask Copilot and Copilot will just do everything for me. Understanding what does Copilot do? What does it do well? What does it not do at all? And it's not a tool to do everything for you.
Well, that's why I think the branding was so brilliant. It's not, as somebody said in the audio portion, it's not an autopilot. It's not the pilot.
Yep.
It's the Copilot. Yeah. And so there's a human that's involved with everything that it goes and does.
Microsoft got the naming right for once.
Oh, yeah, for once. Well, sort of.
They don't change it.
Well, then they just rebrand. That's part of wave 2 was the rebranding of the clarification of course, some of that, and then the shift over to for some. I think it was one of those things. I related it as like writing for a soap opera. Like, what's going to happen in the characters 6 months of their life? Like, we don't know. We've not written that yet. It's almost like we start naming everything Copilot. Did you not think about the impact of slapping Copilot everywhere on everything with no differentiation, it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of Viva flashbacks. Everything was Viva for a whole year. It makes me think. I took an Uber at one point to the airport in Seattle, and it was a Tesla self-driving car, and the guy's standing there, and he's got his hands on the steering wheel, and I said, "So do you ever, if for Uber, do you ever let the car drive itself?" And he says, "It's been doing it the whole time." I'm like, "Excuse me, I work in tech. Tech fails. As the passenger in this car, you should have told me that this was on autopilot, because I don't trust it." So maybe I'm a little more skeptical. Is same thing with Copilot, right? I don't trust it.
Well, the first sign, Sherry, would have been the helmets, the complimentary helmets in the seat. So just look for that. That's the indicator. Well, I want to move forward to. This was a broad question around AI readiness. Question 2 is a little more specific. How should organizations assess their current data management and infrastructure before integrating AI solutions like Copilot?
Yeah, I saw responses like rot, definitely clear out the rot, the redundant and old data for sure. What I've been suggesting normally on this is using tools to help, the tools that we found. And I'm not going to say them because I don't want to have to be a promoter for one, but Microsoft tools, in my opinion, are not typically strong enough for me. But auditing your data, this is that time. You should have been doing it for the last 15 years. Yep. But this is the time. Look for oversharing is the easiest way I can word it.
Well, that's what sitting in an ISV booth the last couple conferences and people coming over, and we just kept commenting. It's like it's something where interest in Copilot and Microsoft has done, I think, a sufficient job of raising the alarm. Like, you need to go and think about governance. You need to clean up, look at security, look at like these different aspects of it before you can fully deploy Copilot. And it's driven a lot of interest to the ISV community. So that's great for them in that space. But you're right, Eric. I would say it's more than 15 years. I'd say closer to 20, 25 years of saying the same stuff about cleaning up the data from a search perspective. And then every other, solution that has been released in the collaboration space has needed, or the best practices have been, go and clean this up. Your permissions, your classification of data, the IA structure of that, purge data that's old, move it onto other platforms, get it out, to actually think about what are people actually doing on this, what data they need access to before you go and then give new ways of finding that content. Because if your platform, your environment is littered with garbage, terabytes of garbage, then what's that experience going to be like? And the responses out of AI are going to be largely trained on garbage.
The one big consideration of that is some documentation needs to be kept for historical purposes or legal purposes. And just because it's out of date doesn't mean it doesn't need to be kept. So I always encourage my clients to create a retention center that's basically another SharePoint site collection that is not part of the search index, that they can't find the things that are there. So sometimes it means moving stuff to where it can be retained and you have retention policies around it. But just because it's old doesn't mean we don't need it. There are cases where we do need it, unfortunately.
I'm also going to add in too that we've spent years trying to get users to adopt a lot of this stuff. And so you're kind of battling yourself, right? Like trying to teach users how to use OneDrive to share links and do co-editing and all of these other things, and what's the path of least resistance for them. And so as you go forward and we start to get more and more security controls, you have to be careful not to swing that pendulum too far over to the point where you're making it hard on the users, because what are the users going to do? They'll find another path. It's just like water. Like, it will always find the path to least resistance, which, Sherry, you and I were kind of bantering back and forth on the TweetJam around, anyone can access kind of thing. And that was always the default easy, because I just need to get it on and I need to move on with my day. How can I make it so Sharon can have it and then Sharon can share it with whomever she needs to? And so if you start locking it down too much, and it's like, oh, I got to go find that person's email or whatever, and it's just, then you've got to be aware of what you're doing at that point, because otherwise, to Eric's point, what you're going to end up with is all that old stuff that's hanging around that you just don't know about, and it becomes weaponized at a later point.
That's why Microsoft's made it too easy to share stuff. Microsoft's made it way too easy. Click, share, go, and they don't look at how they're sharing or who they're sharing it with.
Yep. I don't think the answer though is to not give people the option to share data. That's why every Copilot output, I always, first thing I do is drop it in an email and blast it out to everyone. Unedited. No, but it's but when you have more free and open, it means that you need to have stronger governance and more cleanup on what they have access to. So the answer is not restrict access. Not that you were suggesting that, Sherry. I'm just as making a point. But it does mean that you need to be proactive in your governance of those things.
Well, there's a difference. The security people move it over to restrict, right? Like that's their default, which is
it's easier.
Restrict.
Right.
Exactly.
That was the early days of SharePoint. Lock it down. No one can do anything, and therefore we have control. No one does anything wrong. Correct. But then they also don't use it.
They don't do anything. That's the problem.
Yeah, but another one to Sherry's point, and I think it even goes back to what we talked about before, is treating Copilot as a Copilot, where you still have to review the results. Is to Sherry's point, if you're keeping that old data around, you have old employee handbooks that you have to keep around, because if a lawsuit comes up from 5, 6, 7 years back, you have to know what the employee handbook says. You also don't want people going into Copilot and asking for what is our company's vacation policy, and it pulls something from an old employee handbook. So not restricting it, but then your users also have to be aware that Copilot's going to pull from anything that's not restricted. So if you have old versions, old documents, you have to review it and make sure that these responses are pulled from valid, accurate, up-to-date data, which I haven't tested. Can Copilot pull from like old WordPerfect files? Because we all know there's some of those sitting out in SharePoint somewhere or something.
My understanding is no, but yeah, it's a good point.
Well, there's no XML layer in that they can read the data from in a WordPerfect file, right? Am I wrong? I'm asking because I know that's why the content is searchable. And
let's go research that and do a blog post on WordPerfect to Copilot integrations. I think that would be fantastic for those two people. So
to that fact, even old versions of documents that are still in not the XML format, they're a DOC or an XLS, and without the X, are those searchable? Because is the content actually searchable, or just the titles and metadata?
I know.
I see a challenge coming up.
I'm pretty sure
I know, right?
I'm pretty sure the content is searchable yet in old DOC files.
Is it?
There's a list somewhere. You can ask Copilot to tell you.
Yeah. Well, you can do
SharePoint.
SharePoint 2003, 2007, those were all old DOC files, and search still worked. And let's face it, the search interface in SharePoint Online is still the exact same search interface as way back then.
Are you calling it a Frankenstein product, Ben? Is that what you're saying? Can I quote you on that?
Maybe, sure.
Well,
user profile service. Can we call out all the Frankenstein products in SharePoint Online?
Products in general out there. Well, so question number 3, what are the key roadblocks organizations typically face in planning for Microsoft Copilot, and how can they overcome them? I mean, we've just kind of identified some of those, but I'd like to hear more experience, the conversations you're having with clients. Are there anything that we've not discussed here that turn out to be roadblocks? Or is it mainly this issue, this cleanup, preparing for before fully turning it on?
I think that the number one thing that I'm seeing, the number one roadblock that I'm seeing is users, stakeholders, leaders, they don't know what they want. They don't know what problem they're trying to solve.
Oh, that's not good when she's in the hurricane zone.
To me.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Sharon, you're back. We lost you there for a second.
Asking. What is it
Offering.
capable of? What problems can we solve with this?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think we're going to get into that later too, around the ROI discussion for this and understanding what that is. I mean, this is something where, as much as like we go to these conferences, like I was at the Power Platform conference in Las Vegas, you know, not my favorite place to go, but I do enjoy seeing the community and participating in things. But one of the complaints is that there's so much of the content that is Microsoft marketing versus use cases, stories around that. I said, yeah, look, there is value though out of some of that marketing messaging around answering some of those types of questions. Microsoft is trying to answer those and provide them based on their pilot, you just have to remember that the initial pilots where they've got, hey, we had 50 huge enterprises that went and tried this out. Yeah, you handpicked the best scenario companies that were gung-ho on this, you know, but so you look at the marketing, look at the messaging with an understanding of, you know, that lens of understanding of who those players are, but they'll start to answer those questions. Like, here's where we saw value. This is what we saw as a return. We saw improvements in these areas with this focus. You just have to be prepared to answer those kinds of questions.
Yeah,
and maybe treat it like a discovery where you're asking, like, what are your biggest questions? Then go back and find the answers and come back and present on those things.
Yep.
Well, I want to reinforce what Sharon said, because early in my consultancy, I'd had people like, can you build me this? Can you do this? I'm like, yes. And then they come back like, well, it doesn't do this or doesn't do that. I'm like, wait. What's your problem? Not like, what's your problem, but what's your problem? Like, tell me because they don't know what they don't know. And, you know, some of us have a cross section of knowledge over things that's like, you're using a screwdriver when you should be using a hammer. Let's find the better tool. And just because Copilot is out there as a tool does not mean it's going to solve the problem that they're having. So let's start with what the problem is and then pick the right tool to fix it. Don't just try and figure out, oh, how can we fit Copilot into our day because we paid for it and now we want people to use it. And somebody thought it was shiny and pretty, and Microsoft said in their marketing, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Well,
so
we all know the
business
difference.
outcomes.
Yeah, we know the difference between the advertisement, and we're starting to really experience this in life, right? The difference between the advertisement for what we want to buy, all the things it's going to promise you that it's going to deliver in the advertisement, versus the people who have gotten really good at using certain tools. And I mean, tech, I don't care what you're talking about. If I watch a commercial about a tool that they're like, it's going to do all these things for you, and then I'm like, that's going to help me. That's going to solve my problems. And then it comes to me and I get the tool and I have no idea what to do with this thing, let alone know how to do the thing that I'm trying to solve. I think that's just such a big issue for people right now. They don't get the difference between what's being sold around this and what they're actually going to do with it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why you won't
my dishes and does my laundry. I'll be happy. That's
yeah, you will not trick me into buying a fourth Cuisinart. No, sir. I am on to you guys, late night salespeople.
So you're telling me what Microsoft is showing at Ignite in those is not real? It's Figma? Are you sure?
Yeah. It's real enough.
Yeah.
It's real enough in the heads that they would like to do it this way. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what you always have to ask, like, knowing behind the scenes, like, okay, how did they do that demo? How did they show that? And it was really cool that they did that thing. And I can see the future, you know, there. And then you realize, you know, how much is just.
Well, there's a big difference between what is out of the box and what can be done too. And this is, you know, people come to me all the time. And they're like, can you do this? I'm like, I can do anything with enough time and money, but what do you want to do? And what do you think? Because then they'll be like, well, as long as it's out of the box. I'm like, that is not out of the box. Well, it should be, but it's not.
Great example for that is that when they did the initial Copilot launch and they were showing some of the coolest stuff were the data visualizations out of like Excel.
Yeah.
None of which were real. None of which are available. We're still waiting on a bunch of things that they showed us a year and a half ago.
Yep.
But it was the cool stuff. Like I see the future. That's what we want. We want to bring, you know, the a stronger, or I guess getting visualizations out of that, asking questions about trends, about things like, again, using natural language against a massive spreadsheet to be able to find data that I need to focus on, just sounds almost like talking to Hal in the, not Hal the MVP, but in 2001, the movie, talking to the computer and asking questions, or, Star Trek, computer, can you tell me this? Like, we're getting close to that.
So close.
Well, and you can't fix bad data. So you can, even if you build a visualization, if your data is bad, and AI doesn't fix that, you have to have a good data source.
I'll probably say this, and most people will probably laugh at it, but I don't know that, to a certain extent, Sherry, I don't know that that matters, because they're going to go build that image with or without AI, and the data may or may not be good. Like, at the end of the day, the tool is just accelerating how fast they get to bad.
Yeah.
From that perspective. And so from that viewpoint, I don't know that matters. I do think, though, that Christian, like where you were going, and Eric, you kind of made a comment earlier around, like, when you talk about grounding and all these other things, and people's eyes glaze over, right? We've got to get it down to the point where you can talk about it with your family, or with, like, it's the mom test, right? Like, can I talk about it with my mom and she's not gonna, like, be lost in like 4.5 seconds? And so we still have to get there. There's still a long way to go from pulling all of this. And yes, there's a lot of training. We've got to get those early adopters still within it, so they can showcase in natural, common, day-to-day speak of what we're going to get to, of what they want to do.
So, Adam, we have that now. Copilot, I mean, it's basically, I refer to it as like the Michael Scott feature, is that you can get a response back for something, analysis, and say, now explain it like you would to a 5-year-old.
Yep. Yeah, but you have to take that extra step. You still have to, like,
Correct.
We have to get to that point where, and it's been interesting, effort. Like, there's still additional effort, and we've got to remove some of those friction points, and again, we have to be able to explain it to somebody of, oh, well, this is how you prompt, and you have to be able to ask the questions like you would normally, like, it's like, oh, I want to find out more about this. Just how would you type it into Bing? How would you type it into anything? And literally just, we have to become more confident in that. And I will say this, I think that there's partially a generational aspect to that, because I watch what my kids do and how they talk to their phones and to their tablets and everything. And I think they will be further ahead, because they will more naturally know what we're talking about without us having to use terms like grounding. Like, they're never going to need to know that for the most part. They just are doing it naturally, and they've adopted it way faster than we have. Or at least
you can't say grounding with kids. They understand that.
Yeah, they do. They do. They should. They should know. They should know. Which that might be another issue.
Problem to all of this. One of the issues, going back to the question you were asking, is what's the roadblocks? Is understanding what the technology can or can't do. And I believe the answer often is you need to understand the technology. If the kids are just using this and they don't understand where this data is coming from, and they take it as truth, that's a huge problem. I recently had a conversation with someone like, okay, we want to release Microsoft Copilot in our organization because we get Excel spreadsheets with 1 million lines of rows every day, and we want Copilot to be able to tell us how to make better business decisions. It's like, Copilot can't do that. Gen AI cannot reason for you. You're going to have to tell it what you're trying to get out of it, but to just say, tell us what to do with the data, Copilot doesn't know any of that stuff. And if it did, it would just be, again, creating a predictive answer. It wouldn't actually be trying to understand or reason the data. We're not there yet. So I'm a little scared if
or the historical context it's coming from,
faster.
Like where you've been. It doesn't have that either.
But if you process it, that's the key. Like, you get to it. Sorry, Sharon.
No, you're fine. I was just, we were just talking about this the other day, and I was thinking, I can't wait until we get to the point where it's like, we'll have AI doing one thing on one side and AI doing something on the other side. And at the end of the day, the AI is dealing with the AI. So Eric, to your point, I'm just thinking, eventually the AI will create the data. It will evaluate the data. It'll dashboard the data, and then you're asking it to actually look at the data that it created in the beginning and then make decisions about the data. And so you got to think, like, to some degree, like, how asinine is this?
Yeah.
Didn't that happen? Wasn't there one of the Silicon Valley episodes? Did any of you watch Silicon Valley, where they had the two bots that started talking to each other back and forth? Yeah,
I believe it.
That's what I'm referring to. So essentially, like, eventually I'll just turn on AI to answer all of my responses, and somebody else will do the same thing. So I'll have somebody using AI to reach out to me, and my AI will be responding to them. So at the end of the day, nobody's even talking to anybody.
Let me time my people to their people.
But somehow your calendar gets filled up regardless. So
yeah.
That way AI is going to do it for you. It's going to fill up your calendar.
I was inspired during the TweetJam to ask Copilot to answer the questions that we're asking about Copilot. So you'll see a bunch of tweets in there. It's like, Copilot says, so here's all the informed decisions or, viewpoints of people like us and how they answer those questions. And this is how AI would answer that question. Yep. Let's compare those. Let's see. I'd love to. That
would be an interesting blog post there, Sherry. I don't want to steal that idea from you, but sounds like something I would blog about. But yeah. Well, so question 4. I mean, we've kind of talked about this some, where there's overlap here, but how can organizations balance the excitement around new AI technology and the need for it to deliver on real business outcomes?
Yeah, I think someone already did kind of refer to this as, why are you getting AI? What is the business problem you're trying to solve with AI? I 100% fall into this. I'm a tech geek. Like, I'll go buy a new computer because I want to play with it, or go buy this gadget or buy that gadget. And I'm like, okay, so I spent a bunch of money on it, but what is it actually trying to solve for me? I think a lot of us have fallen into that same trap with AI. It's like, AI, I got to go have it because everybody has it. But what am I really trying to solve with it? Am I, like, for me, one of mine is, I'm in a lot of meetings. I more or less work for myself. I always forget to take notes during meetings. I get busy talking. I'm focused on the conversation. I forget to write stuff down. So for me, a great use of AI from that perspective is doing the meeting recording and the meeting recaps. It's actually solving a legitimate business problem for me, with the meeting recording, summarization, to-dos, all of that. But I think there's a lot of people that just, they go get it and start playing with it because it's a shiny new toy, without thinking through, how am I going to use this in my business? What problems is it going to solve for me?
And I think that's where, again, I go back to the comment I made about going to the conferences, and a lot of the Microsoft marketing is trying to focus more on, hey, these outcomes, this is what we're seeing. Now we need to go validate those things for our own organizations, for our clients, to see if that's the case or not. And then what scenarios, I mean, Microsoft is hitting some high level there. They may share things that are industry specific or role specific around those. But I mean, we just need to go on a similar path where we are creating those ROI statements for the companies that we're working with on, look, these are actual examples of how you can leverage this. Because a funny thing happens when people, I make this case when I talk about like the business analyst role and translating between the tech team and the business team. And part of that is like, when do you talk to people about the new technology of the art of what's possible out there without skewing what they actually need on the business side? And what I mean by that, if you go talk to somebody and ask, what are your requirements for this project? Like, what do you need? They're going to give you answers based on their experience today and what they understand about what the technology can or can't do, but it's relatively limited. You show them the new great technology that does all these things, ask them their requirements. They're going to start asking for things they don't really need, but now they're excited about all these other things. The reality is somewhere in the middle there, and it's things that you can have grounded in actual business outcomes. Here's how we tie this new to what we actually need to get done, and this is the next incremental step for us to improve, do things faster, do it better, all the qualitative answers, but here's the quantitative measurements for success.
one of my answers to you on this balance between it that I have found to be successful is the idea of a pilot group. Companies want to get going right now. They're too scared of things. And I found that get a pilot of 5-10 users that you trust, that are a little excited about it, and start playing with this. Help find those business values, find the data
but
problems.
Have a real project, have a real problem. Don't just generically look at that in pilot. Pilots should be focused on a real world scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's a good way to get started if you want to now, because rolling it out to 1,000 people right away might be a little scary. It's just a good stepping stone.
Yep.
I was just thinking that, we don't think about it a lot, I think, because we are the R&D people, we are the innovators, we are the ones that sit at the very front end. In the past, they call us glutton for punishment, right? Because we're the ones that go out and we're like, hey, let's try the new tool and see if we survive. But I think, to your point, Eric, having pilot, not just groups, and Christian, pilot experiences, I think is super important, because you're sending somebody out and saying, go try this, go work out the kinks, and then come back and tell us if it worked and how successful it was. And I've experienced this in large organizations where we have small groups where we take a problem, we solve it with whatever the new technology is that we're trying to adopt out, and then come back to the larger group and say, look, we used this, we had this problem, we solved it this way, and now you can use it to solve these problems as well. And I think it helps to solve that original problem of, we don't know what this can even do, if we're then tackling smaller problems and bringing them back, because now people can be like, oh, okay, you solved your problem that way, maybe I can too. And then the cool thing is, now we can go try to solve a different problem, then bring that back into it. But we're the ones taking the risks, right, at the very front of it, trying to solve those problems.
Well, there's also like the A/B testing of pilots. I mean, having separate independent pilots and then looking the data, the output from each one of those. What did we learn from both of these? So the pilot is not just a one-time thing. You might do multiple pilots and you roll those learnings into the next one and have like different criteria. Let's now go leverage this learning and see what new things we learned. Does this improve this experience? So that, you should take your time with those to learn, again, so that you have a better understanding of here's how it should be used. Here's where it can be used. Other qualitative improvements there that people really like. But at the end of the day, is it now measurable, repeatable, that we can get this value, the business outcome out of it?
Yeah. I had an experience with a client that ties into this. I'm going to go back to my meeting recordings where I had a client come to me and they were like, we're interested in Copilot. We don't care about how it works in Word. We don't care about how it works in Teams, Excel, all of those. We have these problems with meeting recordings, and we want to know, can Copilot solve these? And I got on the call with them, and they did not just want a demo of what is Copilot in Teams for meeting recordings. They actually got on with me and they had a list of 10 questions. We're in this scenario. We record a meeting and we have people call in with a phone number. How do we tie that phone number to a person? Can Copilot do something there? How does Copilot work with meeting summarizations? If we need to purge something from a meeting summarization for some reason, how do we go in and do that? Can Copilot help us with that? And it was a very step-by-step, here's our pain points with meetings and meeting summarizations and recordings. Can Copilot solve this or not? And how can it do it? Not looking at it as this is new shiny AI, but here is a legitimate set of requirements. Does it do it or not? And if not, we're going to go look at other AI alternatives as well.
Yeah. It's one thing I'm excited about with the agents model is, agents being able to, you can pre-build and agents can recognize the need to call on other agents to go do even more complex tasks and activities. So again, this space, very interesting. It's very exciting how fast it's changing, but you'll get more out of it if you understand what you need to have done, at the onset of that project, of that pilot. Jumping to, I know we've got just 15 more minutes here, 3 more questions here. So governance, we can handle that in 2-3 minutes. In terms of governance, what should companies prioritize when developing frameworks for security, data privacy, and compliance with AI tools like Copilot? It kind of goes back to the readiness and what we kind of answered at the beginning.
I'm going to jump in here and I'm just going to say, because I speak a lot on maturity, and I feel like if you are already have a mature competency around governance, you would already know what the answers to this are. And so I think this, it goes a long ways to saying, well, what are the things we should do now? It's like, well, the house is already on fire. Maybe you should have thought of that a while ago, right? Maybe you should have thought about what's going to keep my house from catching on fire, not how to put out a fire and clean up the mess afterwards. Because at the end of the day, you guys can answer all these questions, but I want to bring home the point that I think a lot of people don't think about the maturity when it comes to governance in their organizations until after it's too late. They don't think about things like security until after it's too late. They don't think like things like this until after there's an event that makes them think, oh, I probably need to do something about it. So my comment on this is use this as a good opportunity to invest in your competency around maturity for governance holistically, so that the next time this opportunity comes up, you're already prepared for it.
Yeah, Sharon, just made me think of this too. Like looking at the maturity model, part of the problem that why governance can be such an ugly word is because organizations get in there and realize that they need to skip a couple steps to get to where they need to be for this new thing, and that you can't. You've got to do the work. You've got to go through those activities, and that can be painful. It could take time. It can be
painful, expensive.
depending on what needs to do. Right, all those things.
Yeah, I woke up on the snarky side of the bed this morning, so you might have noticed that in some of my responses today. But my point on that was that the people are. If we don't prepare the people, we can't afford training. We can't afford change management, but we all have job security because we go in and clean up the messes they've already made because they pulled the trigger before they were ready. Mm-hmm. And good people are, bad people are still going to do bad things. Good people do bad things inadvertently because they don't know. And, that happens because we don't train them, we don't inform them, we don't communicate with them. And that all comes from that maturity model of, what do we expect? How are we going to minimize this? But, hey, I've got job security. Thank you very much. I'll go in and clean up your mess every single day. And you can pay me to do it now instead of doing the training and change management you should have done 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. That's
right. I think there's nothing new that you need to be doing with Copilot. Everything that you should have been doing.
Still true.
This is everything you should have been doing for the last 20 years.
Yep.
Copilot doesn't require you to do anything new from a security, data privacy, compliance thing. It's just surfacing bad practices that you've had since you first started throwing documents into SharePoint 2001 or Office collaboration server. What was it before 2001?
Which branding wave are you talking about, Ben? Which renaming and rebranding wave?
WSS.
The Tahoe wave. Post Tahoe. Yeah.
Completely agree that you should have been doing it all already. Automation, people. This isn't going to get people to start doing any governance better than they did before.
They freaked out on Delve. I'd go in and do these customer immersion experience, and I'd take them to the Delve page, and then they would go in there like, everybody can see all this stuff. It's like, well, because it's security trimmed. You can see what you're allowed to see, and that it's exposing the holes in their security.
Which, by the way, I don't know if you guys saw, I shared a link to that article about, Delve end of life. Actually, we talked about it. Sean McDonough, Jeff Orosky, and I talked about it on the podcast, the CollabTalk podcast going out later today. But, the first big news that we shared was the Delve end of life. There's a great article, the link that I provided there. If you go find me on X, on Twitter, you'll see the link. But that outlines the actual impacts of Delve shutting down. And there's a lot of organizations that don't think that they're impacted by it being shut down that will be. And so, again, that's understanding with something like Copilot is you need to understand the impacts. It's much more pervasive across systems and access to the data. So it's bigger than you think it is to roll it out. And there's things that you need to do. So we've got in the time we have left, question 6, how should organizations measure the success of their Copilot adoption? what metrics matter most in determining its business value. So
This
first off, is there something that stands out to you, or where you've had with customers like this is the highest value reason for utilizing Copilot?
I think this goes back to Sharon's point of have pilot groups with real world scenarios and being able to measure that and get the ROI. I threw out there, like I had out of the kind of a last minute, I had to do a huge slide deck, and I had all my research in a OneNote notebook, which I exported out to Word and I brought into PowerPoint. I had created an 80 slide deck for me that I did have to go in and tweak and fix myself afterward, and Sherry eyes it, but that was a huge time saver for me. Do you know how long it would take me to create 80 slides by hand? So things like that, where this is a real world thing that happened, and being able to share those stories. But where do we find those? We've got to focus in and give them, here's the problem, how are we going to solve it, and how did they solve it, and did it work?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But I think the problem is that especially when you get into enterprise, so 1,000, 5,000, 50,000 seats,
right?
It becomes a lot more black and white from a usage standpoint of, are they using it? And you're going to get economies of scale where you're going to have your power users who are amazing at it, and then you're going to have your users who aren't as powerful with it. But so long as they're using it, then the usage component becomes your one and only driver of, is it making a difference? Now, in the end, Sherry, you made the great comment of it, but and yes, in an ideal world, you can go and find and get all those soft numbers and put all of those things together. But I really think from an enterprise level, it's just straight usage, and can you justify it financially?
I just want to share kind of a side on this topic. So I did an interview with, so it's episode 140 of the CollabTalk podcast. Yes, I am promoting my go subscribe. No, I did a great interview with Christy Hissa, so get her profile down here. So she's a general manager at Kairos. So it's a company that is looking at, they do consulting and have product as well, looking at performance data around meetings. And one of the things that I would say early on with Copilot, I mean, just for the ability to capture and provide insights, and then to be able to automate, get data out of meetings that are recorded, and what do I need to follow up on, and what do I need to go and do, and how do I need to prepare for upcoming meetings? What do I need to do after meetings? I mean, this goes back to, I think it was like 2015 or 2016 at Microsoft Build, where Microsoft had on stage like a fake little conference room, and they were showing kind of like the future of meetings, where they were saying that AI is going to, this is what like before, during the meeting help with, and what it'll help with afterwards. That value is, to me, worth $30 a person. If I can make people X percentage more efficient, more value out of the meetings that they are in, like, you can calculate the cost of meetings. You could say your typical employee, here's the average salary, annual salary, here's the average monthly time in meetings. If we can reduce meeting participation by 25%, here's the dollar value of that time. I promise you, it far exceeds the savings from those activities alone in an enterprise, far exceed the $30 a month per user.
I'd say $30 per day on using Copilot, and that's not a joke for me. I have to agree that for the most of the orgs I'm working with, just Copilot usage right now, just to know who's using it, who's adopting it, is a huge like first basic step. Another one though, kind of a little out of left field, that I find that may work for some orgs is monitor your service desk or HR ticket support requests, those kind of things, because Copilot should help in a lot of self-help situations within the organization. A lot of people using Copilot for a stronger search engine. We've already talked about it. What's the HR policy for such and such? Yep. It's something that you should consider. I would suggest you'd consider on Copilot adoption is watch some of those outlier metrics. Watch email usage. Does it go up or down? Watch Teams messaging. Does it go up or down? Because hopefully you should have to ask less. Hey, what was in that meeting? What did I miss? You could self-help yourself a little better.
Yep.
I think that's a great point. I was going to add one more thing. So I know Sherry does a lot with training and some of us do a lot with training, but I think, when we think about what, to your point, Eric, when you start asking Copilot to help you with things, one of the things I think about that I've noticed personally is using all of the productivity tools. I find that even though, I'm an expert level certified in certain productivity tools, I still don't know how to do certain things. And I've been starting to use Copilot to have the tool help me to do things. So if I don't know how to do something, I'll be like, hey, can you do this? And it'll just do it for me. And I didn't have to figure it out. I didn't have to Google it. I didn't have to YouTube it. I didn't have to even go to search or click on the help. It just did it. And so I think when we think about the distance between us and all tools, any tool, you're closing that gap, which is making all tools more productive generically, just by having a tool to kind of go in between us and the tool. So
well, so last question here in the last couple minutes, looking ahead, how do you think AI tools like Copilot will transform not only day-to-day operations, but also the overall business strategy of organizations?
The upskilling that Sharon just said, I think, is a huge one. I've become pretty proficient now in a lot of aspects of Microsoft Fabric. I did it very fast. Why? Because I would ask Copilot to help me figure something out, and it would create complex DAX queries that were 90% of the time wrong, but I could get them to work right. And if I had to go and try to use Microsoft's docs to figure that out, it would have taken me days, weeks, or months, and I could do it in 5, 10, 15 minutes. So that's a huge one, where I expected. That's a low-hanging fruit, though. There's much better business values, I think, that we'll get out of AI.
No, yeah. I'm big on that one, too, because girl don't code. This girl don't code. I don't like to code, but I can read code and tweak code and make it do what I need to do. So to your point, Eric, it's like, can you give me a formula? I'm like, yeah, it's not quite right, but I know enough and I'm dangerous enough to be able to tweak it to get what I needed to do. But again, it still takes that human going in with thinking skills and going, that's not quite right. Instead of just saying, here's the formula it gave me, stick it in the query or whatever and see if it comes back with what I was expecting or not.
So when we talk about code, we are talking about HTML and a little bit of Python, because then I'm a coder too. Right?
Well, so what I said was work smarter, not harder, and I think that's the overall theme of that's what's going to change. Yeah. In let's work smarter, not harder, and we don't have to know everything. We can't. It evolves too fast. We can't keep up with it. So
thinking about
business.
All right, thinking about business strategy, like I'm just kind of thinking it's almost more of a question. I don't know that I have an answer for this. Typically in businesses, right, when you're writing employee handbooks, you're writing HR documents, you're writing documentation for the company, you're writing it with the mindset of people are going to go read the document, try to find what they want in the document. Is this going to change the business strategy of how you create content for your users? Because users are no longer going to go read documentation. They're going to go ask Copilot. So our business is going to start thinking through more. I need to create content or create my business structure in a way that optimizes the results people are going to get when they're going to Copilot instead of going to read a Word document or look at an Excel spreadsheet.
I think it moves away from documents. It's going to be more towards like a knowledge-based type structure. So where the individual owners and the people's experiences with those things, they're going to that KB versus looking for a doc and the documentation that walks through. It might be that document might still exist or leverage like Microsoft Docs out there on the internet, but it'll be tagged within or linked within the knowledge base article, where there might be a whole dialogue and the change management chain of like what's been updated and why around that. But and then you just need to then train Copilot to know to look for and prioritize the latest updates to those articles to be able to get the best data and the conversation that happens around those.
Right. Or even shorter articles. Because right now, going back to the search engine, right, you go use Copilot, you ask it, and it says, it gives you the cross-reference. This is the document I pulled it from. I don't want to have to go, if I'm going to validate it, I don't want a 50-page document or a really long knowledge base article. where I have to go figure out where it pulled this 1 or 2 sentences from. If it's going to cross-reference and point me to different references, do I want shorter knowledge base articles so I can quickly find where it pulled this from?
That's what I'm saying. The KB, I mean, it's not going to be the long document with 20 different items listed. It's going to be the individual KB or the shorter format of that data.
So here's the case in point for that. When I work with new clients and I do a POC on their intranet, I always take their HR department because everybody can relate to that. Either you work for HR or you consume HR content because you work there. Convert your employee manuals into pages. Take the content from that. What's my leave policies? And then you have that broken out. And then have a resource like here, like to your point, Christian, here's the document that it came from. That way, number one, in the search, it's going to come up faster because it's on a page and not 50 pages down in a Word or PDF file where it may or may not find it. And then it's too far down on the search results. And it converts that documentation into something that's more consumable and findable. And I love that other people are thinking that way because I've been doing this for like 7 years. Get that stuff out of Word documents.
We're doing search engine optimization of our content, of the structure. That's what it is break it down into those consumable pieces and look at the patterns. How are people looking for this information? What types of queries? What type of responses there? And then fine-tuning your approach, your IA for the structure, the classification of that, and also in the creation of that content.
And don't give me a link to a document library.
Right.
Like an all documents view of a document library that has 500. Don't give me that. That's not usable for people.
Well, folks, I know we're at the top of the hour. Want to respect people's time, so thank you everyone on the panel for participating about the TweetJam and in this call. For folks that we will be back next month with the next CollabTalk TweetJam on November 26th. Don't have the topic locked down. I'll announce it in about a week. We also have, I believe, on the 31st of December. It's always the biggest TweetJam, which is the end of year. What was the biggest news of the year behind us? What are our predictions for the year ahead? So watch for that. We'll have then panels after each episode. So thanks everybody for participating. And if you want to find the recording of this will be out on my YouTube page. You can find it there. Ask other questions. If you ask a question like, hey, Adam said this or Eric said this, I'll ping them and say, hey, go respond in this question wherever that showed up. So hopefully we get some responses out of people. But thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.